I remember back in the day, it was a group called The Time, and they had a lead singer named Morris Day. And Morris Day, in the middle of his performance, he had this stick that in the middle of his performance, he would ask his band member Jerome to bring him his mirror. Now, Jerome would bring him out this pretty lengthy mirror, and Morris Day would check himself out in this mirror and prep, signifying that he was so much of the ish that he could stop in the middle of his performance and check himself out. You tune in for those in the cheap seats. I think nowadays, if we look at the stick of Morris Day calling for a mirror and buying into this persona that he was so much of the ish that he could stop his performance, he could stop you from enjoying his music, for him to take the time to prep in the mirror. And this persona that he had, this stick that he had, he would perform on and stop his performance just to check himself out, just to show you that he was that vain and that much of the ish that he could just stop the performance to check himself out. He had you buying into the delusion that he was that in. And I think nowadays we have a lot of women buying into the Jerome mirror syndrome or delusional mirror syndrome, where they're seeing something in a mirror of delusion that others are just not seeing. Now, I do understand where this comes from. Don't get me wrong. Black women have been beaten upon. Their self-image has been not the greatest representation in media. White media, I might add. Which I've always talked to black people about this. Until you get your own, you can't cry about poor representation. Because if you're not supporting your own, then who are you to tell a person who's putting their resources behind their publication, their media, that you should be properly represented? See, this is why I believe that if you're going to be a force in the world, you have to have your own. You have to be able to control the narrative of your own image, your own representation. But not to get off subject, let's get back to this Jerome delusional mirror syndrome. This comes from a place of trying to shore up self-esteem of black women who would be considered not that attractive, or maybe not the best looking. Maybe most of these women are average or below average. And I get it. You empathize with these women. You want to shore them up and reinforce positive self-esteem. But you cannot shore a person's self-esteem up by selling them a delusion, which is what we've done now for the past 40, 50 years to women, is to sell them this delusion. And by the way, this is a delusion sold to women by women. Now, you cannot replace low self-esteem with the persona of delusion that is not based in reality. Because what you've done, you've essentially taken a delusional mirror and held it up to women and told them, oh, you're beautiful. And I get what you're saying, but you're not delivering the message correctly. What you're simply telling them is that you're a beautiful soul. You're a beautiful person because you are part of the world and can make an impact. They're not necessarily talking about looks, because beauty may be subjective, but clearly we all live in reality and can look at someone and tell when they're not attractive. I hear a lot of people saying, well, there's someone for everyone. That may be true, but that doesn't negate standards of beauty, standards of attractiveness. You can clearly look at someone and tell when they're attractive and when they're not. You can clearly look at someone and tell when they possess beauty and when they do not. This should be a non-starter. We shouldn't even have to argue over this nonsense. Although beauty is subjective, there are standards of beauty that people don't meet. There are standards of attractiveness that people don't meet. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being average. There's nothing wrong with being part of the 90% of the world that are, 90% of the world that is average, I should say. And I think the reason that women are having an issue with being average is because you've been sold snake oil. You've been told that black girls rock. You've been told to believe in black girl magic. You've been told that my melanin is popping. And all those slogans are fine, but when those slogans become personified in delusion, then you have to step back and look at what have you been teaching women over the past 40 years. And what you have been teaching women essentially is it doesn't matter what reality is. The only reality that matters is the delusion you're selling yourself in your head. And this is very dangerous because now we have a society of women who believe they deserve things that their position in life just don't facilitate those things they're actually wanting. And you can say that it's a woman's right to have a standard. I'm not going to argue over people having standards. I'm not going to argue over people having preferences. What I am going to tell you is that if you sell yourself a delusion, you can't then get mad and turn around when people don't buy into your delusion that you've sold yourself. See, this is the dysfunctionality of the black community, because you sell yourself on a delusion that's not based in reality doesn't mean we have to partake in that. You can't tell me that you're the best looking person in the world because you say so. That makes no sense. You can't tell me that I have to buy into your delusion. See, you can believe anything you want. You can believe that you possess millions of dollars. But if those millions of dollars are not tangible into your bank account, it's a delusion. I remember going up, I'm a Generation Xer, and there was this movie when I was younger, I was about 11 or 12. There was this movie called The Boy Who Could Fly. And in this movie, you had this guy, I think the boy had to be like 16 or 17 maybe. And I think he was autistic or something like that. And every day to like from the morning to night, this guy would go up on the roof of his home, of his grandfather's home, I should say, and stick his arms out like an airplane and pretend that he was practicing flying. Now, clearly there was something wrong with the guy, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. They looked at him and, I think they took pity or empathy for the guy. But something happened when a new neighbor moved in, and they had a daughter that was about the same age. And at first, when she looked at the guy, she was like, why isn't anyone telling him that he cannot fly? Why isn't anyone getting him help? And as she began to, get further and further into the guy's life to figure out what was going on with him, she bought into the delusion as well. She started believing in the delusion that this guy really could fly. And eventually, to wrap the movie up, she ended up hurting herself because what happened was the guy's grandfather passed, and he was going to be taken away and put into an institution because, like I said, I think the guy was autistic or he had some mental disability. And she wanted to rescue him so that, wouldn't befall him. And I think she ended up getting hurt. She went to the hospital, and the guy ended up actually being able to fly in real life. Now, I should say real life in the movie. Now, you can look at the movie from a surface level, but I tend to look at things from more of a introspective level. The movie was alluding to the fact that if you believe in something enough, then it can happen. But the movie also had a duality that if you buy into delusion can harm you, and delusion can be unhealthy. I think low self-esteem is unhealthy, as well as a delusional outlook on life is unhealthy. And I think what we have to start doing is stop trying to reassure low self-esteem with delusion. You have to tell women that, yes, you may not be the most attractive woman in the world, but that doesn't mean that you don't deserve a decent life. But you have to tell them in a way where they understand that just because you make a certain level of income doesn't mean you deserve a man that makes that same level of income if those men do not desire you. See, what's going on now is you're trying to put upon men perceptions of what you think they should accept as beauty standards, and that's just not going to fly. You cannot make men like what they're not attracted to. And it's vice versa. You cannot make women attracted to what they're not initially attracted to. So what we have to do is we got to cut out all this crybaby whining. Um, I'll address colorism in a later journal, but all this crying over people not wanting to date you. Date the people who do want you. And let me say this. Let me just veer off my delusional Jerome mirror syndrome for just a second. Divesting from people who look like you to go to others who do not look like you is a losing strategy, because at least 87% of a particular race or ethnic group prefers to date their own. And the number that will date out is very minuscule, it's very small. And it may seem like, because you're looking at media all the time, you're on social media all the time, you see all these rappers and athletes and people who are in entertainment and these stars dating outside their race, you may put yourself in a dome and think that's the norm when it's not. Just because you're being fed a steady diet of propaganda and media does not make it true. The reason media has such an influence on people is because you don't take the time out to think upon, why are they pushing this to me? You just ingest it and accept the propaganda that media is teaching you. But let me go back to my point so I can wrap this up, because I'm getting long-winded here. Black women, stop looking at yourself through a delusional mirror, because the rest of the world sees something different that you do not see. And it's not being mean, it's not wrong to tell a woman that she's average looking at best. Now, granted, you may not like the gentleman's approach, and I'm talking about Kevin Samuels. You might not like his approach, and that's fine. You can have qualms with his approach, but what you cannot do is take issues with the truth. And the truth is, the woman was average, and there's nothing wrong with being average. She was looking at herself through a delusional mirror, just like so many other females. You cannot look at yourself through a delusional mirror. You have to look at yourself in reality. You have to look at yourself through a realistic view. And people know when they're attractive or highly attractive when they're not. So stop trying to sell this snake oil that beauty is subjective. Although beauty is subjective, most people have a pretty good standard of beauty that we adhere to. So just to wrap this up, man, I don't have angst or animosity towards black women. I understand where you guys are coming from. You just want to be loved. You just want to be accepted. And there's nothing wrong with that. But date and be with people who accept you. Date and be with people who appreciate who you are. Stop chasing this elusive, high value, cream of the crop, upper echelon guy that you cannot attain. And you know you can't. He's not going to lower his standards to accept you, and you're not going to lower your standards to accept someone who you're not attracted to as well. That's all I got tonight, man. Like, comment, subscribe. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.